Okay. We good with me starting the recording? Good, good. Okay, let's make sure I got this correct. Stop share. There's that. Okay. Okay, and now we're going to share our screen. That one. Okay. Boom. Okay. Everyone see the big screen that says Professional Standards Commission? Good, good. All right, so what I have for us is a presentation. So our discussion this week is to talk about each of the professional standards and what they mean. We're going to do that right now. This is the one that I did in a school. And then there's a thing that goes along with it we'll get to in just a moment. Let's see. So the first one here. This is super important over everything else. The PSC doesn't care what you do in your personal lives as long as it doesn't carry over into your professional lives. Now, before we even jump into what that statement means, what is the PSC?
Professional Standards Commission.
There we go. And that is the group that we ultimately answer to. That's kind of our standards and practices. Um, basically, as long as it doesn't carry into your professional lives, and we talked about this when we were talking about stuff with law. Um, if somebody does something off campus, how does the punishment happen at school? And the question is, well, did it carry over to the school? And if it did, then the school is involved. Another thing about that, real quick, before we jump in even deeper here, when we talk about the school, you guys realize that the zoning of the school is much more than just the physical property of the school building, right? Anything that is deemed a bus stop, that's school property, right? Well, it's county property, which is then used for the school. So anything that happens there, just as if it were happening at school. Anything that happens on the bus, school property. All of those things could be a thing. Now, let's see here. These are the three main duties of educators: to teach children, protect students, and act professionally and ethically. That's easy enough, right? If only it were that easy, right? Should be. Okay, so here's what ethics are, right? We've got all of these things here, right? Knowledge codes, rules, knowing the right from wrong. Conduct, so our behavior that aligns with the knowledge. And the courage to execute in the midst of pressure and doing what is right when no one is looking. I'm sure you've heard that before. If you haven't, you'll be the one saying it, right? Okay. Standard one, an educator shall abide by federal, state, and local laws and statutes. Okay. Real simple. Okay. Legal compliance. Unethical conduct includes, but is not limited to, a felony involving moral turpitude. We'll get to that in just a moment. Any criminal events involving controlled substance or marijuana, any sexual offense, and code section 16 and any laws applicable to the profession. Okay. So basically, if you're convicted of a felony, you probably have to answer to the PSC. If you get a DUI, that is a public record. The smart thing to do there is to let your admin know as soon as possible to let them determine how they're going to proceed. That more than likely will not affect your job in the short term, but it could in the long term because that falls under moral turpitude, right? Standard two, shall always maintain a professional relationships with all students, both in and outside of the classroom. This means we don't follow our students on social media or have them follow us on social media. Now, you can decide on your own if after they graduate, if you are one who wants to do that or not. That's really your own personal call, but just know whenever you do that, you are taking a professional risk. Right? We do not give our cell phone number or address or any of that information to students or parents. And that's hard, especially when we're working with clubs or, in band programs, you get to be very tight with the families. And a lot of times, giving them your cell number is the easiest course of action uh, to get in touch on certain things. Just be very, very careful with that. I would never give my phone number to a student for sure. Just know if you give your phone number to a parent, they will use it. Eh, An educator shall refrain from the use of alcohol or illegal or unauthorized drugs during the course of professional practice. So, you can't drink at work. You can't smoke at work. You can't do controlled substances, even prescription medications at work that affect your ability to do your job effectively. Now, I'll give you a quick scenario. You're having an allergic reaction to something. You take a Benadryl. Well, then you have to go get in front of children. Now, people's reaction to Benadryl might be different, but what if yours is the actual side effect of it makes you drowsy? If it makes you drowsy, does it cloud your judgment? Would you be okay to drive a car? If the answer is no, you do not need to be in front of children. Um, and I would say, as a general rule, and I'll tell you because that has happened to me before, and I had always taken a non-drowsy formula of an antihistamine whenever I broke out with something at school, and it did happen. And one time I went to the clinic and I asked for something, and they gave me a Benadryl, and without looking, I took it, and I'm sitting in the middle of class, and I went, "Oh no!" And, and I mean, I knew exactly what had happened, and I called the admin. I was like, "I need somebody to take over for me," and I got a ride home because even though it probably would have worn off by the time it was okay for me to drive, it was not okay for me to be responsible for people's children. So, and that falls right in line there. Okay. An educator shall exemplify honesty and integrity in the course of professional practice. Unethical conduct includes, but is not limited to, falsifying, misrepresenting, or omitting things like IEPs, degrees, reasons for absences, or grading. So let's talk about some of these real quick. I'm going to come back to IEPs and I'm going to come back to degrees. Let's talk about reasons for absences because that's one of the most common ones that teachers will do as far as professional honesty, right? So, you're sick, you don't go to work one day, it's fine. You use it as a sick day. Okay. You go to Lake Lanier Islands or you go to the Bahamas or whatever, and you're still there and you want to take an extra day, great. You take that extra day, but you called in sick for it. And that day, while you were there, you're posting on social media, hey, look at how cool this is. That is a violation of your professional honesty. It's also dumb. It also happens in every school every year, multiple times a year. Um, and you should know, I know that nobody here is doing that, but you should know your admin has every legal right to turn you in for that behavior. Now, if you chose to do it as a personal day and submit it as a personal day, you still don't need to be posting on there because that just begs a question, right? You don't want anyone to question your integrity as to whether or not it was a sick day or a personal day. They just knew you weren't there. So, as a general rule, if you're out, don't post anything that day online or on any type of medium. It just makes it so much easier. Okay. Going back into IEPs. If a student and we've mentioned this before, if a student has an IEP, they are protected by FERPA that you can't just sign off on the IEP and put it in a teacher's mailbox. That is a violation of that student's rights. You must physically hand it to whoever is the next in line. You cannot discuss it with anybody that is not on that IEP as a privileged owner of that child's information, right? And that might be all of the teachers that work with that child, and of course the parents and anybody who's in their Infinite Campus or Schoology or whatever program your school uses. Okay. Degrees. You would be amazed at how many people will falsify what their degrees are in. Um, and it was very interesting. What happened was G.W. Bush came up with this term highly qualified. And when he was in office, they decided that if you were uh, a classroom teacher, you must be highly qualified, as in your certification should be specific to that area. Now, for most classroom teachers, that wasn't an issue. But there were people who were teaching special ed that didn't have a special ed endorsement, or that had the general endorsement of special ed, but didn't have specifics of special ed, but were still allowed to teach. I was affected by that in that I was kind of a jack of all trades teacher for a while there, where I taught beginning band, I taught general music, I taught pre-algebra, I taught creative writing, I taught social studies, is whatever they needed. I taught those subjects because I could, and in some cases, in most cases, I enjoyed teaching them. I was not certified to teach those things, so when that highly qualified came out, they said, "Oh, well, he can't teach that anymore." And they also said, or you can go get certified to teach that. And I said, no, I'm good. I only did those things so I could have a job here. I really want to be teaching music. And that was ultimately what ended up happening. Um, and now over to grading. So that one is a very interesting one, especially for my fine arts people, because there's so much subjectivity in our grading, right? Um, Certain things that we give grades for, a lot of times, especially I've found this with fine arts, with music teachers, you cannot, and I'll repeat this nice and slow, you cannot give a grade on an activity that happens outside of the school day. If a student doesn't come to the band concert, which is after school, you cannot give a grade because the student didn't attend the band concert. What you can do is you can offer as an assignment that we are going to do blank, blank, blank. Here's an after school performance that we're going to be doing, which would give you some extra credit, Or you could say all of the work leading up to that concert that happened during school. Those are things that can count. You can't take points off if they don't attend rehearsal if the rehearsal's after school hours. And I was just as guilty of it as most of you have been, fine arts band teachers and orchestra and general music teachers. We've all done that before because it hurts the program. When a kid's not there, it hurts the program. It's the overall picture. But that is an academic honesty thing. Even though it hurts the program, it's not as hard as it is for us to say it's not about the program. We want to believe that it is, but it's about the education that we're providing. Now, if a student is unable to attend for whatever reason, and you know ahead of time, especially this happens a lot with middle school music programs. Oh, but he's got a baseball game that day. Well, how many baseball games does he have? How many band concerts does he have? Okay. Would you like me, band teacher, to talk to his coach? I'd be happy to do that. Is there something we can do to make that happen? I'm not going to tell the coach that it's going to affect his grade because it can't. Now, the coach can say, I'm not going to play you if you miss my practice because you're paying that coach for them to be there, right? That's not part of the quote, free and public education of which our children are entitled to. So, and I know that's a tough pill to swallow, but that is the fact. And if someone were to question you on that, you would lose that argument. And as much as it sucks to say, you should lose that argument. If the kid isn't showing up for your concert, chances are they're probably not an A student anyway, right? Number five, an educator entrusted with public funds and property shall honor that trust with a high level of honesty, accuracy, and responsibility. Keep good records. Don't ever let money sit in your desk or anything like that. It's gotten easier with things like school pay, um, and different apps like that now that people aren't really using cash as often anymore, and people aren't really using checks. Um, it's funny, my son-in-law, when they were getting their wedding together, he asked my wife and I if he could fax a check to the venue, to which we just kind of shook our heads and said, you know what, let's just bring it there. And we've been making fun of him for a year now over that. But we may have failed as a society with that in mind. But again, anything with public funds, when you have stuff like school pay, a lot of times you don't ever need to see it. You just need to make sure that your bookkeeper has created whatever the link is and that you've posted the link and that you're keeping up with it somewhere. Whatever money is coming in and specifically what it's for, and that you can justify that that money is spent for that thing. We run into issues with that. Art teachers will run into issues with that too. We'll collect money for, let's say we're doing a big clay project and we collected money. Now, they probably aren't doing that in our bigger suburban school districts, but in our smaller districts, they do. You probably have a budget that you can, go ahead and have all those supplies that you need for stuff like that. But let's say you're a smaller district and you say, hey, we're doing this really cool clay project, but we need to collect money for it. Well, every dime that you collect for that needs to buy clay or something to do with that clay project. Otherwise, that is a professional dishonesty. It's not, you're not meeting your responsibility. We're a nonprofit organization. There are never excess funds. There can't be. Okay. All right. Standard six. You need to maintain integrity with students, colleagues, parents, patrons, or businesses when accepting gifts, gratuities, favors, and additional compensation. Um, it's tricky. Um, Especially for some of the folks in this class right now. I know many of you are very, very gifted and loved teachers in your communities. And I'm sure you have had parents that just want to give you the moon to show you how appreciative they are for all of the wonderful things you have done for their children. Maybe you've taught multiple children of theirs, right? If a parent gives you a gift that you think is too generous, usually anything exceeding $25. Each school district will have its own policy, but in general, it's about $25. Um, it's tricky, you're really not supposed to accept that. Um, I had one year, we had a parent who thought, these teachers are so great to my child. I am going to give each one of my child's teachers a bottle of wine, a nice bottle of wine, like a $30 bottle of wine, cork, whole 9 yards. There's like the indention at the bottom of the bottle. I mean, this was not your gas station wine. This was legit, right? And so we get a message from the principal that says, I need every one of that teacher. I need you to bring, before, if you haven't opened it yet, please don't open it. I need each of you to bring your gift from so and so to my office immediately. And we did. We put them in the trunk of the principal's car, parked her car across the street, and said, you can get these after school. They cannot be on school grounds. That is a big issue. Now, that was the way that that principal decided to deal with it. That was also a positive reflection to the community, right? That would not offend as easily as what we would want to say is, you know, um, sorry, but we can't accept this because that parent, like I said, there's probably a $30 bottle of wine, and this parent bought seven of them. Um, so Now, one thing that can be done as far as gratuities and stuff like that, if the entire class decides to do a class gift, and you can factor in what that, contribution is a sufficient amount and not an excessive amount, that is usually okay. But even still, anytime something exceeds $25, I would let my administration know just because you never know. Um, Also, uh, in addition to this part here, if you have jury duty, you get paid for jury duty. So technically, even though you declare jury duty to get a sub in your building and that's covered and all of that, you are being paid by your school system. And in many cases, because a lot of us live in the school districts or county where our school is, you might be getting paid for something else while you're getting paid for that. And that is also remunerative conduct. Basically, you are supposed to, and it used to be you had to hand in the check or gift card that they gave you from the courthouse when you went to do jury duty. You're supposed to give that to your bookkeeper and they could do whatever they wanted with it. Now, recently, like 2 years ago was the most recent time I had jury duty. I did that. I brought the gift card in, and the bookkeeper said, no, we don't have to do that anymore, but you are supposed to report it. So, interesting stuff. Standard seven. Okay, confidentiality of student and personnel records, standardized test material, and other information. Um, yeah, Shelby, you're in a smaller district, right?
No, I was in Chatham.
In Chatham. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and they require us to turn in whatever it is that we get compensated with for jury duty. We have to turn that in to them.
Yeah, when I was in Fulton County, that was the requirement as well. And in Forsyth County, I was told we don't have to do that anymore. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I'll
it-
check with my new district because I don't know.
yeah. Okay, so standardized test material and other information. I am sure that every one of you knows this person, a very twitchy, usually with glasses, um, person that wears a sweater regularly in April because they have their arms filled with books of testing getting ready to hand out. They are so by the book with it, and they are so tight with it because they are liable for everything in there. They are also culpable if they are unable to provide everything back that they got in, right? Every scrap of paper, every mark that goes on the Scantron sheet, right? All of those things is part of the responsibility of standardized test material. Now, here in Georgia, we have a very, 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 very large testing scandal in Atlanta public schools. Um, and I will tell you, yes, now the tests are online, and there's a lot of other things that have happened, and we'll talk about those too. But having seen some of the things that had happened there, it was things like, if the answer is A, I will stand in this corner. If the answer is B, I will stand in this corner. C over here, D over here. And, the child would raise their hand with a number of fingers, and the teacher would go move to that corner. It was messed up, messed up. And then more so, the bigger thing that happened was when the kids finished the test, there were teachers who would go back and take, say, the last 10 answers and make sure they were correct and bubble them in for the kid and erase and bubble in for the kid. Obviously, that is a huge ethics violation that actually put people in jail. Um, but like literal prison. Um, and I I worked with a person who went to jail for that. I did not care for the person at all, and I was not the least bit surprised to see that she went to jail for that when it all went down. Um, Ethics are one of those things that are free, you know. Having good values and being a good person's free. All the other stuff is just people trying to cheat, get around stuff. Required reporting. Okay. You have to file reports a breach of one or more standards in the Code of Ethics for educators, child abuse, or any other required report. That would be the big one for us would be mandated reporter. And those are the reports that we do at the very beginning of the year where they tell you if a child tells you something happened, your job is that you have to report it. Yeah, crazy stuff, Adam. Crazy stuff. And when we're not recording, maybe we can talk about this at some point because I bet we know some of the same people. Um, and I'm curious to see if you know the one that I was thinking of because I'll tell you, that was one of the sweet, sweet poetic justices of my career was seeing all that go down. Um, okay. The law states that an educator must make a report on suspected child abuse immediately and no later than 24 hours. Now, let me tell you, those happen most frequently on Friday at 3 o'clock or whatever time your school day ends, right before the kids get on the bus. That's when those because the kid doesn't want is afraid that they're going to be going home and maybe they're not going to have a meal again until Monday, or maybe they're going to be in an unsafe environment for Saturday and Sunday and they're scared. Brittany, that's awesome. Yep. Um, so even if that happens, and I'll tell you because I've seen it and I bet you've seen it too. It almost always happens right before a vacation or right before a weekend. And it hardly ever happens on the first day of the week, middle of the day when we all have time to deal with stuff. It happens when we don't. But you know what? That doesn't matter. We still deal with it because our first responsibility is the safety of those children. Um, Okay, so required reports. Here we go. A school counselor failed to report a suicidal ideation. That's when a kid is thinking about it, talking about it, but not actually doing it, right? The eighth grade student who had just returned from mental health treatment asked the counselor, if I killed myself, would it be on the news? The next day at school, the student superficially cut her wrists and neck. The educator said she did not take the comments seriously. Okay. Now, yep, yep. So it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Your job is not to believe it or to not believe it. Your job is to report it. Now, as the teacher, which all of us here are teachers or an administrator of some sort, right? Um, you can't follow up. Once you have done your job, which is report what was said to you to the counselor, to the school psychologist, to whoever is above you that is responsible for handing that, you're done. And legally, they can't come back to you and tell you the results because that's a FERPA violation of that child's rights. But again, and I've worked with counselors that, would say, listen, I know this kid. It's just doing another report's not going to help him. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because I have kids. And I'm telling you right now, if it's my kid, I want you to do a report every time. Even if even if they're doing it every week, always do the report. That's my child, right?
I had when I taught high school, it's the only time this has ever happened to me. I had a parent who was furious that I kept reporting to guidance about her students. I mean, he literally grabbed an X-Acto knife and was holding it to his wrists in class. And so obviously these are things I reported, and she's like, y'all need to stop doing this. My kid doesn't need help. He says he's fine. Da 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 da. And she wound up pulling him from our school because she was so angry at how many times we reported things. And I'm going, that's denial.
That is a parent's right to do that, right? It is also the right of the state to bring in Department of Family and Child Services to that home, which they probably had, I'm guessing more than once. It is frightening how that has happened, how parents have done that where they just get sick of getting caught, so they pull their child out of the school. I had in one of the schools I taught in a very wealthy community. These twins came in towards the end of the year, and God, they were so special to me. Loved these children. They came in, they were third grade age. They had never walked into a school, didn't have shoes. Right? And this was a country club. All the kids that went to the school lived in a country club. These kids, their you know, parents, they had a rough situation, whatever. The children were removed from the home and brought to live with an aunt. Neither child knew, they were twins. Neither child knew how to read or write, uh, anything like that. Very, very low, not by any fault of their own. It was just literally mom and dad would say, just go play. And they had never been enrolled in school. Well, this was years ago. One of the children is now in the military, doing fantastic. Graduated from high school. Now, he was 21 when he graduated from high school, but he graduated from high school, joined the military, doing great. The sister also graduated at 21. She's in cosmetology school, doing great. But again, this was a case where the child wasn't given, the parents just hid the fact that their child was there because they were going to get in trouble for some unethical doings of themselves, what the parents were doing. Um, so they kept their kids away from school. All right, so let's go to standard nine. PSC has identified circumstances that warrant educators leaving their contract positions without a release. Okay, now, if You leave your contract. Let's say your spouse gets a job somewhere else and you have to move. Chances are your school's going to say that's fine and let it go. But they're well within their rights of your contract to report it to the PSC that you're violating Standard 9 if you leave mid-contract. Now, as I'm saying, most schools wouldn't in that situation, but they can, and they're not wrong to do it. Um, Another one is to willfully refuse to perform the services required by a contract. I came across this a lot. We called it DNR, duties and responsibilities. Um, you have a set of duties and responsibilities as an educator. And sometimes your duties and responsibilities might be to greet students as they come out of the carpool line. And you go, it's not my job. Well, apparently it is. Uh, apparently that's part of your job. And, my wife laughed at me because for the past 2 years, part of my job was to hand out napkins and ketchup packets for 45 minutes uh, during the middle of the day in the cafeteria. Said, I am the highest paid cafeteria worker, I think, ever in Forsyth County schools. And you think about all of the things that they could have done with whatever my skill set was, and the other people in there as well, what their skill set was, what we could have been doing with those people, but instead we had them handing out napkins and ketchup packets. Now, as dumb as I thought it was, and honestly, I thought it was dumb. I still went because that's my job. It's part of my job. Thank you for this paycheck. My children love eating every month, really every day. And you guys allow me to do that. So if that means I have to hand out napkins and ketchup packets, well, as dumb as I think that is, I guess I'm going to do that. Yeah. Wipe tables, mop floors, and open. Isn't that crazy? But that's what we do, you know? Is it insulting? You bet it is. It is absolutely insulting. But then again, if you are a specials teacher, how often is what we do treated in a way that is insulting? Pretty regularly, right? Right? We're babysitters a lot of times. We're a planning period for somebody or a bathroom break. And it sucks. And we fight very hard for that. But that's an argument that we're never going to win as far as this refusal to whatever our duties and responsibilities are. Because the truth is, the school has to the school has to be able to run, and all of us have a part in it. Okay, and let's see. Here's another example. Oh, that was mandated reporter. Back in. Okay. An educator shall demonstrate conduct that follows generally recognized professional standards and preserves the dignity and integrity of the teaching profession. Um, well, we talked about that last week when we were talking about, sharing our political views, our religious views, or whatever. Um, we are apolitical, period. We're nonpartisan. Um, and even if and I'll tell you, it happens more with the littles than it does with the older kids, but they hear their parents talking about stuff and all of a sudden they're experts. And, you have, you know, third graders telling you who's running for president and how they're going to vote for them and who are you voting for and this, that, and the other. And they want to tell you all the stuff and they don't even know what half the words mean that they're using, but yet they're using them, right? Because that's what they heard their mom or dad say. And the same is true with religion, when talking about holiday stuff, they only know what they know, right? Which also means the other side of that is that they don't know what they don't know. And there's so much that they don't know. Um, but in order to preserve the dignity and the integrity of our profession, we need to make sure that we are there to inform, but not to persuade. And standard 10 shall administer state mandated assessments fairly and ethically. That goes back to what we were saying earlier. Uh, you'll notice as you look at these 10 standards that a lot of them kind of have a little repetition to them. That's okay. Um, it's interesting to me. Well, it is and it isn't a little interesting to me that we bring up mandated assessments in the standards of our job. So let's see. That covers that right there. Hold up. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that for a moment. Pull up the next. Okay, so I want to share this with you real quick. So what we just did was my abbreviated version. Okay, I want you to see this is what the state of Georgia wanted every student or every teacher to see. There's 96 slides here, I believe. Yeah, 96 slides. That is, oh gosh, 80 some more than I shared because we talked. Um, and ultimately, they want you to sign off saying, hey, I saw it, I agree with it, or I don't agree with it, or whatever. All right, so can you guys see right now? Can you see something that says Code of Ethics and it looks like a Google form? Awesome. Okay, so let's do this together. All right, let me get this back to full screen. Full screen up here. Okay, good. So, first question, the PSC does not care what you do in your personal lives as long as it doesn't carry over into professional lives. True or false? If it's true, thumbs up. False, thumbs down. All right, good. Okay, well, let me do it differently here. Okay, good. And I put this in the very beginning of the discussion. Uh, if you wanted to play along for yourself, the very first thing under meeting chat is a link to this form. You don't have to do it. This is just to see what we know. Okay. Unethical conduct includes, but is not limited to, the commission or conviction of legal compliance. That would be a felony or any crime involving moral turpitude, any criminal offense involving a controlled substance or marijuana, any sexual offense, Code 16, any laws applicable to the profession, all of the above or none of the above. Did you just say all of the above? You're right. Okay. Now, I want to see if there's a chance that this doesn't work.
Pizza Today has been around
Can you
since
see this video?
1953, and it seems like a nice gesture until you realize that there's also a National Donut Day that gets more attention. I didn't even know there was a National Pizza Day until today, actually, but it doesn't get as much attention as it should, but hopefully things are starting to change thanks to awareness campaigns like this one from the National Association of Educators.
I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher.
I'm a teacher.
I work hard every day.
In the classroom and out to educate your kids.
Your kids. Your stupid, stupid kids.
Who don't listen.
Who don't pay attention. They text under their desks, okay?
They're lazy.
They don't care.
They're horrible. And fat. Super fat.
Because you let them eat crap.
Lunchables? Really? You have fat, dumb kids.
Not all kids. Not the Asian kids.
Your kids.
You raised them poorly. And now I'm supposed to fix it?
You fix it.
You know your little genius can't even name a foreign country?
One country in the whole world. Pandora?
Pandora's not a country.
It's a made-up planet from a movie.
But your kid thinks it's real.
Because it was in 3D.
That's how stupid your kid is.
And it's my fault because I should have taught him better?
Blame the teacher.
Haul my ass in for a review, huh?
But it's all worth it when I get that big fat paycheck.
$800 a week.
Maybe I'll take a vacation this year.
To Motel 6. Guess we'll have to hold another bake sale.
Oh, bake sale, yay! Like your kid needs another brownie.
Anywho, National Teachers Day. Remember,
You don't suck.
you
suck.
suck. Thank you. A message from your kid's teacher.
Okay. Wonderful. Now, I would never show that in a classroom, obviously, but tell me, what are 3 things that you saw that are considered unprofessional? You could turn your mic on and share with us. Shelby is shocked. I love that.
Well, I mean, I'm like, these are some of the inside thoughts we have. Like, I may look at a kid and go, oh my God, does this kid really think Pandora is a real place? But I'm not going to look at the kid and go, are you stupid? Like, I would never do that. And so obviously this is satirical. It was made for that purpose. But yeah, calling them names, telling the parents that they're terrible parents, the cursing. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. So good. We get the vibe there. All right. Let's skip down here to number 4. An educator shall refrain from the use of alcohol or illegal or unauthorized drugs during the course of professional practice, which the following is not considered an instance of professional practice. Let's see. In the classroom, is that professional practice?
No. Wait.
Yes, it is. We can't be doing any of those things in the classroom. At a school-sanctioned off-site event.
That's cool.
We can't do any of those things there. At a PTA meeting. Nope. Can't do those things there. At a restaurant. At a restaurant, it would be okay to do some of those things. But if there are school people there, if you're there and, I would still, I'd have a hard time with it. And I tell my wife a lot of times, I'm just too cheap anyway. I don't order drinks when I go out because they're too expensive. Like I could buy a whole bottle of that at my house, versus what I would pay for one, Anyway, all right. Number 5, teachers are expected to share an IEP information with anyone who expresses a concern about the student. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Julie, that happens every time. Taking them to Braves games, taking them to Gladiators games. Like, listen, thank you, but no. Yeah. Okay. This is a tricky one here.
Wait, did you say absolutely they have to share with anyone who expresses?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought you said absolutely, and I went, wait, hold on. Okay.
No, you cannot share. That is privileged information. You cannot share IEP information with anybody who is not listed as a teacher of record for that child. Okay. Let's see. What can Title I funds be used for? School resources. Now, I have come across very rarely people that were able to word something to where PE equipment or musical instruments can count as school resources, but in general, they don't. They should, but they don't. An educator shall comply with state and federal laws and state school board policies relating to the confidentiality of student and personnel records, standardized test material, and other information. Which of the following elements is supported by this standard? Annual performance evaluation record of school personnel. Is that a yes or a no? Okay. Health services provided to an insured. Individual student performance data, information, and reports. school records of students with disabilities, and a student's education record. Okay, good. Number 8, abandonment of contract. The PSC has identified circumstances that warrant educators leaving their contracted positions without a release. Name a circumstance. When is it okay for a teacher to leave their contract without a release granted?
They're moving out of state.
They're moving out of state. And again, they don't have to grant it. Right. They don't have to grant it. They usually do. But again, they do not have to. And I'll tell you what, if you're the one who doesn't, you are well within your rights. And the argument that you have there would be, well, they have a commitment to these children. It's hard to find another teacher to come in there. And all of that's true. And all that is correct. But now you have a teacher who is separated from their spouse and the stress of all of that, in addition to maintaining 2 residences, probably in 2 different states or cities. You don't know if there's children involved. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms. And is that best for kids? If it could be controlled, is that best for kids? Or were you just being a jerk? Okay, number 9, teachers are mandated reporters. If a teacher is negligent in reporting something in a timely fashion, what happens? Frank?
The school must investigate first.
Okay. Good. Yuri?
The teacher could be held liable for what happens to the child, and then, yeah.
Should be, not could be, should be.
Can't they lose their certification in
Yes,
general?
they can. Any of these things, mandated report, the breach of any of these things, you could lose your certification for. And if attorneys are brought in, it will go to PSC for a discussion at least. Even if they decide not to ultimately revoke your certification, it will be reported to them. Because the Professional Standards Commission is a state-run organization, and when you bring legal into it, which you're well within your rights to do, and in a lot of cases you should, because you're advocating for yourself. Hold on a second, Adam, I'm gonna get you in a second, okay? You are spending state funds. So that's where you get, that's why they would bring it to the next level, which is the organization we answer to. Okay, Adam, your question, sir, or comment.
So if a principal wanted to, I guess, fire or terminate, or what exactly is that process? Like what would have to happen for that? Because I'm getting a little confused about what the principal was allowed to do, and then what comes from the district or the school board, or what comes from the PSC in terms of, we gotta let this teacher go.
Okay, there's a couple things. If it is a tenured professional, teacher working one day into their 4th contract is a tenured professional. Okay. There's a whole different set of things that apply. If they are not a tenured professional, if they are within their first 3 years, you don't have to provide anything. You don't need any documentation. You don't need anything. You just got to cut them loose. And one of the weaknesses I've seen in some principals was they were too kind and they didn't cut them loose when they had the chance. Getting rid of a teacher is very difficult to do. It requires at least 1 full year of documentation of a professional development plan where goals are put in place and agreed upon and documented as to whether or not that person or teacher is meeting those goals. They don't have to exceed them. They just have to meet them. And only the goals that you put in place, right? If you have a teacher that's not showing up for work and that's not one of the goals in there that you have on their thing, guess what? If they're still late, you can't fire them because that's not in their professional development plan.
Okay, but question. So what about like I have a friend where this year, I'm gonna straight up say it, she was targeted by our principal. Every little thing she did was scrutinized. My principal, said, okay, we need you to do these professional development things, blah, blah, blah. So my friend did them. She went to them. And I told her, I said, you got to keep your own documentation. But my principal lied on her TEKS evaluation. And when my friend emailed her and said, I noticed you put this in there and this was incorrect, can we please change that? Like, I have it on video in my room that this did not occur. And my principal acknowledged that she lied, but that she was going to keep it that way.
In a TEKS evaluation, you have a spot where you may respond to any and every comment there. If she has it on video, she should add that video to it because that is outside of the principles.
And I think what she wound up doing, because I told her, I was like, document everything, because if she's lying on this, like, the only way you're going to save your job is to be able to prove that this wasn't happening. So she created a whole Google Drive full of documents and things like that. And then she wound up emailing that to the district, to my principal supervisor, because it got really bad at the end, for no reason.
Yeah. Question, could admin delete her comments or video? They can't without approval of a higher up. They don't have access to go in and change anything that they didn't do. That's one of the positives of that system. And believe it or not, I'm actually a very big fan of TEKS if it's done by the letter of what it's said to do. Now, say it's not. It hardly, every once in a while there may be a school that's doing it right. But think about it. A teacher, a tenured professional, should have 3 observations in the course of a year, 2 informal and 1 formal. Yeah, right? Don't you want, when an administrator is in your room, don't you want the kids to not be surprised that there's someone in the room? The admin needs to be present. They need to be comfortable. They don't need to be putting on a dog and pony show. They need to be, this is where the best learning is occurring. Yep. Okay. So, sorry, going back to Adam's question. So that documentation must be in effect if the principal is to let the teacher go. If the principal has decided not to offer a contract. Now, that being said, the thing I mentioned about tardiness, the school district and the Professional Standards Commission, that's a violation of the professional standards. They can deem we shouldn't give this person a contract because they are negligible here, here, and here. But in general, there's 2 things that you do that get you fired if you're a tenured professional without having to do a professional development plan. Yes, it is leaks for admin. Adam's on leaks too. It's basically TEKS for leadership. And one of their professional goals is the way that their teachers are doing. They have to be able to document how their teachers are doing. So when a teacher, Shelby, is being targeted, it's affected that administrator's leaks in some way. That doesn't excuse that the teacher should never be targeted, but chances are that was an administrator that took a hit somewhere and blamed that teacher for it. Things like, sorry, no, sir. My dog's eating roach traps. It's weird. Apparently I did research. They're non-toxic. It's peanut butter in them, but he's already pretty dumb. So he doesn't need any more dumb. Um, anyway, um, things like CCRPI scores. You're not wrong, Shelby. You know, I'm homeschooling him though. Uh, anyway, yes. So CCRPI scores are some of the things that affect those, in addition to um, state tests and all of that stuff would be graduation retention rates, student attendance, teacher attendance. Um, you know, and all of that reflects upon the leadership. So if you have a teacher that is burning through sick days left and right, well, that's affecting, you know, the CCRPI score of the school, which is then coming back on the admin. So got it. Got it. Um, oh, an evaluation. Yes, there is a the staff survey results that come in. There's one for principals and there's one for um, other administrators. The efficacy or and it actually goes to the teachers to do about the administration, and there's also one that goes to the community um, about the administrator, and you know those all of those things are and should be effective measures, right? So Adam, does that answer you? I cut myself off when I said there's two things, money and the honey. We talked about that before. The two things that are going to get you fired are misappropriating funds and being unethical with coworkers or students or their parents.
I think the basis of that question, and not to prolong this any longer, to prolong this, is I've seen admins who are trying to figure out ways to get rid of a teacher,
Oh,
but
sure.
feel like they're handcuffed or they can't do it. I just wanted to figure out that made it clearer, more clear.
Okay, now there is one other thing, and this is, you ever heard of the phrase passing the lemons? So if you have a teacher that is a lemon, right? One thing about tenure is if you're a tenured professional and you move buildings, your tenure does not exist for that first year that you're in a building. So what they could do if they're too lazy to do the documentation is move that person to a different building. And if that person doesn't prove themselves to be worthy within a year, they can be removed without all the other nonsense. But again, is that best for kids? No, it was because the admin was too lazy or weak to do it themselves. Um, anyhow, I hope that answers that. Um, let's see here. Here's one last thing here about human resources.
Human Resources Department. Human Resources Department. Human Resources Department.
Come in.
Hello.
Dr. Cooper, have a seat.
Thank you.
I called you in today because your assistant, Alex Jensen, has lodged a complaint against you.
So I've been told, but I can't understand what she has to complain about. I mean, she has a front row seat as I make scientific history, but there's string cheese in my mini fridge, and that's for anyone. Yeah, and just yesterday, I led her away from a life of sexual promiscuity by making her look at pictures of disease-ridden genitalia.
Cancel my next appointment. This is going to take a while. Dr. Cooper, you said things to your employee that you just cannot say in the workplace.
Like what?
Well, according to Miss Jensen, you said that she was a slave to her biological urges and called her an egg salad sandwich. I don't even know what that means, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you you can't say it.
Oh, I see the confusion here. No, Alex thought I was singling her out. No, I meant that all women are slaves to their biological urges, Yeah, even you. You're a slave.
I'm a what?
I'm just saying, at a certain point in a woman's menstrual cycle.
We can't talk about that either, Dr. Cooper. Your language is entirely inappropriate, and I'm going to advise that you shut your mouth right now.
Yeah, I don't see why I'm the one being persecuted here. Dr. Hofstadter, he was bragging about his sexual desirability to anyone who would listen. And Howard Wolowitz, he spent 2 years using university resources building a six-breasted sex robot. Yep, and at the office Christmas party, I heard Rajesh Koothrappali refer to you several times as brown sugar.
Hofstadter, Wolowitz, and the last one was Rajesh Koothrappali?
Yes. But in his defense, that wasn't racist. He's also brown.
Okay, so much wrong, right? But the thing I like about that clip is he's so oblivious. And a lot of times we have teachers that really genuinely are oblivious. And it is our responsibility to be like, dude, you can't say that. You can't do that, or whatever. Most often it has to do with something race related, gender related, um, that people they don't know what to say. And rather than saying, I don't know what to say, they say the wrong thing. Right? Um, and yes, those are straight up violations of our professional standards. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Good, good. All right. So, yes, throwing all of his friends under the bus. Again, oblivious. No idea.
One can make an argument that Sheldon could be autistic.
Oh, he absolutely is.
Yeah, and they never address it.
Like no, there's been his mama had him tested, and he's
that was if he was crazy. That was if he was crazy.
There's actually many articles written about that.
Yeah,
there's a whole fan thing about it. Yeah,
what's Penny's last name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot about that show.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, yes, now whether or not he is clearly presented that way. My mom had me, that is what he said. My mom had me tested. Okay. Now, with that in mind, as educational professionals, we know we've been around this long enough that you can tell if a student has some type of disability or other impairment or whatever. You cannot legally refer to it. You cannot legally ask. Now, if you're given the IEP, right? But according to the rights of that child, you don't even need to bring it up, especially in a public forum. So I had a young man recently who was incredibly ADHD. And I would just, when he came into my class, I would say, all right, listen, are you going to be able to sit in your chair today? And some days he'd go, yeah, I got it. And some days he'd go, no. He was always incredibly honest. And I said, okay, so what are we going to do then? Well, could I get up and do da 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 da? Yep. But I want to make sure that you understand what we're not allowed to do and what we are allowed to do, and then we'll be fine. And that was, that was how he and I handled it, but I would never do that in front of the class. Um, that's good, Shelby. I notice X, Y, and Z. Um, the reason that we can't say something like that, and going back to the word liable, the minute I ask if a child has whatever, uh, if there is no documentation, guess who is now responsible for all of the testing that that child has? We are.
But see, I guess for me, I would rather if I'm at the point where I'm asking their team teachers, it is greatly impacting their performance in my class. And so at that point, I'll do what I have to do because clearly the kid needs assistance and it hasn't been addressed. And I want the kid to have what they need. So I don't mind it if if I've gotten to that point, I'd
If you're
accept it.
talking to the team teachers, like you said in your comment, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're not talking to the parent,
No.
and you will occasionally have a very frustrated parent that says, I don't know what to do with him. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a loaded question because you can't tell them.
Right.
The response to that is, I would recommend you see your pediatrician,
Yeah.
period. I am not that type of professional. That is a medical question you're asking me. You need to ask a medical doctor. And my joke is I would always say, I can only prescribe homework and projects. I'm not that kind of doctor. All right, Brittany, your question.
I was just going back to the IEPs. I'm just wondering from a school athletics standpoint, do our coaches given the IEPs? Because I know like special teachers or connections or elective teachers, they are typically given the IEP of their students. But what about your athletes? Like I know the whole time that I've been in coaching, I was not given any IEPs. I know the girls who are on the squad who have an IEP, but I just wonder because there was a situation with one of them and her impulsive behavior. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a part of her IEP, like she'll have impulsivity.
That'd be a
So I was just wondering how
504.
that applies to athletics in school.
Well, they have in our district we use Dragonfly. They have to have, do you use Dragonfly, Brittany?
We used to use Dragonfly, but we have a different platform, but still similar
But
thing.
so yeah, so when they have their sports physical and all that stuff, there are disclosures that the parents make there or don't make. If the parent chooses not to make those disclosures, which sometimes they will, because they are worried that it's going to keep their child from getting whatever um, but if you have access to that, which is not in the IEP. A 504 wouldn't appear on Dragonfly. And what you're talking about would be something that would be in a 504. Um, but my child, when they say your child take any medications, what are they taking? Because you need to know that for their health. You can look at that and go, okay, well, let's see, that medication is taken, Adderall. What is Adderall taken for? It's taken for this. Okay. They don't have to tell you that, but if you look and say the child's taking Adderall, you can look and see. And if you're concerned, you probably already are doing that, right? Um, very often, parents especially have a very difficult time um, admitting when there's something different about our children, or that's a hard pill to swallow, right? Because they're ours. They're a reflection of us. Um, and we just want them to have equal footing or whatever, and we want to make sure that they're treated fairly and all of those things. And a lot of times um, when you get into the IEPs and the special ed and all of those other things, um, even though they are there to help, um, a lot of parents, there's it's a psychology thing. Parents have a difficult time accepting that and, and going with that. So there's very common that they would not disclose that, because they'll say there's nothing wrong with them. No, you're right. We're not saying there's something wrong with them. You're saying that. I'm agreeing with you. There's nothing wrong with them. I want to help them. What
Some
can
of my biggest behavior issues even resulted. So, like, I think all of you at this point know that a few years ago I had the kid who went after another kid with a pair of scissors, like blacked out, went after him, and it was one of the most terrifying moments of my career. But because he already had other health issues going on, his grown-ups didn't want to have him diagnosed with a mental disability because they felt bad that he already had what he had and they didn't want to add to it. So they refused testing all the way up until, I mean, the cops were having to get called almost on a weekly basis for the violence that was occurring, and we were like, we can't keep doing this. We have to look at alternative methods. And then that's when they finally started, but that was their hang up.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I know I shared with you guys before, I was undiagnosed ADHD. I made it through fine. But was there something wrong with me? No, there wasn't anything wrong with me. I was undiagnosed ADHD. That was a thing. I'm also left-handed. You know, Not something wrong with me, just means I'm left-handed. You know, I was the only Jewish kid in my school. Not something wrong with me, just meant I went to synagogue on Saturday instead of on Sunday, right? I mean, it's just um but we as parents, we want so much for our children that if something is not the norm, we're immediately wanting to think something's wrong, and it's not wrong. Um and you are right, it makes things make sense. Um in a lot of cases, you've heard that saying, apple and tree. Most cases where you have a child that has that, one of the parents has something like that too. And is going off of the way that they felt, you know um especially with school is one of the weird things that everybody went thinks they know about school because they went. What you do must be easy, right? I mean, I went to school, I was fine. And they base the way that you're teaching their child on the experience that they had when they were a student. And if they had a good experience in school, they are willing to back you up. And if they didn't, they are willing to attack you at snap of a finger. Um, you wouldn't do that, at the doctor's office. You know, listen, I've been going to the dentist now for 50 plus years. I got this one. I brush my teeth every day. I got this. Hey, let me go help that person out, right? Some people I always tell people, I've always thought I'd be good at surgery. Can I try?
Well, have you ever seen that episode of Extreme Cheapskates where they like do their own dental work to save money
Oh
and
my word.
like pull their own teeth?
That sounds like a terrible idea. Yeah. All right. All right. So listen, let me go. I'm going to stop our recording.